Good afternoon. Dean Holmes here, live for Uncommon Sense. Craig Kamanis is currently in an aeroplane flying from Sydney to Adelaide, so we don't have him live today. We did try desperately to see if the Qantas free Wi-Fi would be able to launch him live from 16 or 18,000 feet. But that hasn't worked. But Craig is going to try a couple of times along the way as well. And Craig will be watching on as well on LinkedIn Live. But I did bring a friend along to talk to us today. And it's actually what inspired us in terms of what we want to share with you today. And so I'd like to welcome a video of Craig to get us started. And so this was a video of Craig, unfortunately breaking up, or Craig's hairdresser was breaking up with him.
Breakups can be hard. My hairdresser of 17 years broke up with me on Saturday. As a business owner,
So we won't watch the whole thing, but the important thing, Craig is here on LinkedIn, so that's excellent. Thank you, Craig. So we're not going to watch the whole thing, but you can watch it on LinkedIn, but we'll share it with everyone as well. Most important thing that we learned that Craig was talking about is his hairdresser was changing her working hours, and as a result of that, wanted to change the number of clients that she could serve. And so there was a particular handover process that Craig's hairdresser went through in order to ensure of a smooth, calm handover with, frankly, no questions or complaints through the process. And so that got us thinking a couple of things in terms of what we wanted to talk about today, which is all around the handover of clients within your business or within a buy and sell of a business, and how we can do it better, and some tips and tricks and things like that. So what we want to do first and foremost is I have essentially four categories that I'm going to talk through today in terms of the situations that might happen. So I'm going to talk about how the Rainmaker can have advisors underneath them and pass those clients down quickly and seamlessly. We're going to talk about the retiring advisor. So what's the handover like in terms of a retiring advisor? We're going to talk about the idea that you bought a business, but the advisor didn't do a very good job in handing over. That might be a situation. And finally, we're going to talk about elevating yourself as an advisor in terms of being able to leverage off your support staff more to get yourself more time in the back office. So first and foremost, we'll top left in my mind. So I'd love to talk firstly about the promise. And so this for us is ideal for the retiring advisor, or that advisor that looking to permanently hand over clients and not necessarily come back day to day into the business, or maybe retiring, obviously. And so what we've learned in terms of implementing the promise into businesses is that if you imagine the handover scenario of retiring advisor and new advisor in the client meeting, where they're having a discussion with the client about what is going on with the client handover. And what we want to encourage with the promise is, first and foremost, that the retiring advisor in front of the client gives the brief of the client situation. So what would typically happen is the retiring advisor would brief the advisor in the back office and give them all the update, and then go to the meeting for this handover or meet and greet of the client. And one of the challenges with that is the client didn't hear or see a handover taking place. And so the first thing in terms of this promise is that the handover should be a three-way handover with the client participating in that handover at all times. And so the first step of that means that the client is fully aware that the retiring advisor has told the new advisor all of the correct information to know that they're going to be looked after in the future. And so that's the first step in terms of this promise, in terms of making sure the client knows there's been a good information handover. The second part of the promise is the new advisor doing something early and quick in order to help the client. Now, frankly, this can be pre-prepared, but then spoken about in front of the client. And so it can be fixing a small problem, it can be looking into something new for the client, or implementing something that was discussed and recommended in that meeting. And so what we call from that is that we use the language about our promise to do that for you, Mr. Client. But it's the new advisor promising it to do it. And so, two parts to that is you have to say it. So we might say, for example, oh, Mr. Client, I noticed that we've got your wrong address on this particular piece of paperwork. I'm going to promise that I'll look into that for you, and the team and I will get that updated. So simple example, could be much more complicated, of course, but we've made a promise. And secondly, therefore, we have to execute on that promise within the right time frame and contact the client back to let them know that the circle of this promise has been concluded. And so the interesting thing about this is it gives you an extra touch point. You've delivered to the client, and you've got this touch point with the client that you can have very quickly. And so the sum of those two things means that we're going to have a good client handover to that new advisor. And so if that retiring advisor goes through that process with each and every client, we've got a high degree of confidence of a smooth handover and a transfer of trust. And then it's on the new advisor to make that promise and, frankly, definitely execute on that promise. So that's the first model that we wanted to share in terms of the retiring advisor. Now, the second model to talk through is, unfortunately, if you get the cold handover. So if you're an advisor potentially starting out and you've purchased a client book, maybe you've bought a client book or register with 30 or 40 clients, and they're orphan clients. Either they've had an advisor in the past and they didn't transfer well to you, or it's actually an unadvised client book, for example. And so that's a really difficult position to find you in, because you may have bought the revenue or need to turn revenue on, but you coming in a completely cold, and so you don't have this situation of where you get an information transfer. And so what we like to do in this bit is it's not about the advisor when it comes to the fact that they've bought the business. The clients don't care immediately that you've bought the business or you've got it from a different business or anything like that. The most important thing that they care about is we want them to know that we're ready to learn about them. So obviously we would set the context to say that we've bought the business, but we've got some details about the products that you have, but what we're missing is you. And so that opens up the conversation in our normal, similar to our normal financial planning process, where we can say to the client, tell me about your story. And this allows that conversation to hopefully open up, that you can learn lots about the client before you've said anything at all. So when we've got this cold handover, we want to get the client talking as soon as possible in that meeting, and for as long as possible, telling us their story. We can find out lots of fact find stuff later on once the client is happy and engaged and they know that we understand their story. So that's a little bit of model for the cold handover. I don't recommend it. If you can choose the other paths, obviously they'll be a little bit smoother, but it's going to happen from time to time. So the third element of what we want to talk about today is about elevating in your own business so that you're not the one port of call for everything. And so what we find sometimes in advice practices with one advisor and a support staff around them is that too much still goes via the advisor. So the clients call the advisor's mobile phone number. The clients call the office and ask to be put through to the advisor. The clients email the advisor directly for administration related things. And so this is a handover from, not necessarily from advisor to advisor, but from advisor to business. And this is a really fundamental one in order to scale our operations. And so a couple of stories that come to mind in relation to this, first and foremost. So the first story for me is all about it's the olden days of what it was like when we sent mail or made phone calls to large organizations. And so when we sent a letter to a large company, essentially it went to the mail room, and the communication or the issue was dealt with at the mail room, and it worked out which department that it was most appropriate for. It would go to that department, and then it would be initially read by the most junior person in that department. Maybe it would make its way up to the senior person in that department. If it couldn't be dealt with there, it might make its way up all the way up to the CEO. And so the communication that people might want to send to the CEO would be dealt with well before the CEO actually got to see the piece of paper. And most of the time, the CEO wouldn't have to deal with it. And I'd love us to think about it in that way when we're running our financial planning businesses is how can we change the communication inflows into our company such that um, important things are dealt with before they arrive at the advisor's desk. So yesterday, Paul, my business partner, was at a full day training event, and so being away from the office for a day sometimes is daunting for an advisor because they come back with 100 emails in their inbox. And so what we've implemented in his inbox is that a lot of the time we find that our staff have been empowered and technology wise to read Paul's emails. And so what's happening at that point in time is that our staff members are triaging the emails that are coming into the advisor's inbox throughout the day, deleting some irrelevant things, actioning some things that are actually what they were meant to do, and then only keeping the special important emails for the advisor to read at the end of the day or first thing the next morning. And so that's reduced the 100 emails down to the 5 most important emails that need to be done. If we can do that, that saves the advisor time. The second thing we did at the same time is we tried to centralize email communication so that outbound communication didn't necessarily come from the advisor's email inbox. It came from a client service inbox. Now, some people might argue that that becomes impersonal in terms of that you don't get an email from a person or a staff member at a company. But if we flip it around and look at it from the other perspective, if we do it this way, I believe our customer service will actually increase as a result of it going to a communal pool where the right people that are not sick or on annual leave, the right people can read it at the right time. Now, Craig has made a comment on LinkedIn, which we can share in order to have his participation remotely from literally the cloud today. So he said he was at a session this week where it was raised there was a temptation to tell the clients all about your qualifications to gain credibility and learning about them. Yeah, so absolutely, Craig. I should have read this before I moved on to my next point, but you're absolutely right that if I go back to that about you model, the main thing that we want to focus when we're talking about the cold handover in terms of the about you is absolutely clients don't really care about your qualifications and your history and all of those kind of things until you've taken the time to care about them and learn about their story as well. So that's very good point, Craig, and thank you. And I'll keep an eye on the chat as well so we can get your next point along the way as well. So the next, so that was all about working how we can empower our team to elevate ourselves as the advisor and allow our team to do more and more things over time. And I think that that's a great exercise for any advisor to do. We have a model called Delegate to Success, which allows the advisor to think about the things that they don't like to do or are frankly below their pay grade within their business that they unfortunately end up doing. And that's a good step in actually identifying what they should be dropping at different points in time. The last model that I wanted to share with us today is the situation where you may have a what we might call a rainmaker. So a highly motivated business development advisor who is then engaging the clients and then passing them off to other advisors within their practice relatively quickly. And so we've got a couple of businesses in our network that have implemented this very well in terms of a face of the brand and a face of the company, and then a really solid process in relation to the handover of the clients. So I want to talk through that with you today. So a rainmaker can potentially have enough initial marketing activities and then first meetings in order to ensure that they might be able to grow 3 advisor books all at the same time. So the important things to think about in terms of this is that how are we empowering the team underneath the rainmaker to stand up and prove that they are the advisors that are going to be taking the relationship forward? Because that's the important thing for the rainmaker to consider and manage over time is that we want to avoid that idea that the client wants to stay with you as the advisor. And so we have to break that nexus really quickly and transfer confidence and process onto the next advisor within your company so that you don't have to have any more client interactions potentially, or very minimal client interactions thereafter. And so a couple of things that we want to remember at this point in time is, frankly, who presents and who talks in those meetings is really important. If you've got an idea that you're going to bring on lots of clients and hand them down to advisors, but you do all of the talking within the meeting, the client is not getting the opportunity to build a connection, to hear the other advisor in the meeting, to learn what they're about and what their knowledge positions are, and how they're going to trust that second advisor. So one of the things that I'd encourage in this scenario is that this Rainmaker advisor is actually almost talking as if they're handing over the client in the meeting, and allowing the new advisor, or the advisor, it's not new, the advisor within the practice that will be looking after this client, that advisor is doing most of the talking with just validation and support from the Rainmaker. And the challenge for the Rainmaker is that they like to talk. And so what we have to practice as this Rainmaker is to not say the same thing again. So if you're second advisor that you want to take this lead ownership of the client, if they say a particular thing about a strategy or about our service or about anything else, you can nod your head and reiterate and say, yes, that's exactly right, Mr. Client. But what we want to avoid is you hearing what the advisor has said and then literally repeating it again. The client will hear it and know what you're talking about, but also at the same time, it's not empowering your other advisor for you to trust the things that they need to do. The second thing, it can be planned or it can be dropped on that second advisor, depending on your what you want to do at any particular day. But the advisor that is going to take over the client relationship has to jump up and do anything that you do on the whiteboard, or any presentation or transfer of knowledge in those rooms as well. So I remember doing it to one of my junior advisors many years ago with Shane, is that I would go into the meeting, and just before we go into the meeting, I would just let them know that what bits of the meeting that they were going to run today. Two things happen at that point in time. They pay attention to the entire meeting because they know they got to do parts of the meeting, and so you can't dream off and do anything else. But secondly, when they know they've got to prepare and do parts of the meeting, whether you jump it on them or they prepare it ahead of time, they're definitely thinking about the importance of this client relationship being transferred to them, and they're not going to jump in and save you, or that Rainmaker is not necessarily going to jump in and save you. So there are our 4 frameworks. Thanks, Craig. I've got all your comments, but thank you. So there are 4 components of what I wanted to share with you today, in terms of a couple of different models to take this pain associated with change. And so if we come back to Craig, and I'll bring his beautiful picture back on the screen. So to come back to Craig and his challenge, or the situation that he found himself in terms of his loss of his primary hairdresser, is that his hairdresser took him through a particular process in terms of dealing with his objections, in terms of considering his needs and how he can help. And so the end outcome from that entire process is that Craig couldn't say no to giving it a try. And that transfer has been really good in that he knows the systems and processes around this experienced hairdresser that's taking over is there, and he is going to give it a try. So what you see on the screen there, I believe, is Craig's last haircut from his hairdresser of 17 years. And so next time you see Craig live on Uncommon Sense in the flesh, we hope to see him with another haircut delivered by his new hairdresser. So thanks for your time, everyone, today. Obviously, one man versus two man is a little bit different. But Qantas, you may have heard, changes flights and cancels flights at the moment. And so Craig, at the he found out, I think, about 9 o'clock last night. Flights got changed, and so we have to go on with the show as always. So thanks very much. Please reach out to Craig or I if you have any questions, and look forward to seeing you in a fortnight. Have a great day. Cheers.